I think I better stop you now. And she said, what's that? And I think my wife rolled her eyes as well. And I said, you've just like eliminated the most nutrient dense food on the planet.
Richard, how did you find Carnivore?
Okay, well, thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me on. My sort of carnivore journey started roughly a couple of years ago in March, around about March 23. As most people, I'm scrolling through YouTube and trying to find something to watch, and up pops this sort of doctor who lives in Costa Rica and surfs every day. Paul Saladino. He was my first introduction, but basically he was going on about seed oils, and that sort of caught my eye. The toxic ingredients and everything, what they do to seed oils or vegetable oils. So that was the first sort of video I watched, and then obviously the algorithm then put me down a path. But that really started it off, and I cut the seed oils out that week. Literally, I said to my wife, right, let's go through the products. Let's find what's got seed oils in. This stuff is absolutely rubbish. So within a week, we, got rid of spreadable butter and things like that. And to a point, I noticed a difference within a week, sort of oddly. I can't put my finger on it. But so that was the start, Paul Saladino, and then obviously he was carnivore at the time, and I know he's changed his sort of dietary regime at the moment. But that then led me to Ken Berry, Dr. Ken Berry, and yourself, basically. So within a space of a couple of weeks, I'd watched half a dozen of the carnivore doctors and guys like yourself. And it was sort of hooked me because I already knew about protein and fat from the Atkins diet sort of 30 odd years ago, which I did very successfully. I lost 1 pound a day for 2 weeks. It was incredible, just eating egg and bacon and cutting out the bread and the pasta. But in those days, the internet was very early on, and you didn't have the backup like you've got now with everything you can find on YouTube. So I did that. I did Atkins all those years ago, felt amazing, had so much energy, and then it just drifted back into main Western diet. Back came the carbs. Didn't think anything of it, but fast forward to where we are now, and Ken Berry started talking about proper human diet. I'm going, what's he on about? And then his story was from a doctor, was sort of really was the start of it. And I thought, right, okay, this guy's recognized he had issues and changed his diet and everything, and sort of healed himself, and then was going on to healing his own patients. So I sort of jumped in with both feet because I always ate a lot of meat anyway, but with the vegetables and everything else, and the bread came in there and the pasta and stuff. So I literally, within a couple of weeks, cut the carbs out and started, got my wife to start buying steaks and things, and and we were eating egg and bacon every morning, which we still are. And within a few weeks, I wasn't overly overweight. I wasn't hugely overweight. I'm only 5'7". I'm quite a slight man. I'm 67 now as well, so I'm getting on a bit. But so the weight started to sort of drop down to where, quite quickly to where I was when I left school. When I left school all those years ago, 10 and a half stone. So I, that summer, things started to change. Lost the weight, felt really good, had tremendous energy, was eating, plenty of protein, plenty of, not fatty steaks, but, fillet, rumps, things like that. But again, noticed the difference sort of within a few weeks. And sort of within about sort of 6 weeks, I got confirmation that what was going on inside my body was correct. We have a chap who does carries out deep tissue massage. And I was seeing him on a sort of regular basis because I'm in the building trade. I'm lifting heavy weights and moving around all the time. I'm physically working. So this chap keeps my body in check and keeps me working at the age I'm at. He's a wonderful guy. He's very intelligent, and he's working on me for an hour, 6 weeks into changing my diet. And he lets out a little laugh when he was sort of manipulating my back muscles, And I said, what's so funny? And he said, what are you doing? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, your connective tissues that can connect the muscle to the bone, he said, they're like rubber. And I went, what is that good? And he said, oh, that's brilliant. He said, everybody's connective tissue should be flexible. He said, normally, because I've been seeing him for some time, normally, he said, I have to warm that up, physically rub and warm the connective tissue to move it to get to the muscle, to work on the muscle. And he said, your connective tissues are just like rubber. He said, that's fantastic. He said, what are you doing? I said, I've cut out carbs and I'm eating plenty of meat and protein and there's obviously fats in there. And he went, well, don't stop. This is how it should be. And so that was sort of like confirmation, really. And it made me feel better as well, and made me sort of, gave me a confidence to move forward. So that summer in 23 was, good. It was, the food was fantastic. We were building a house in a very sleepy village in Kent, in England, and sunshine, lovely outside. And the next thing was that I think that June in 23 was exceptionally hot. And my son was on it as well, and he still lives with us. And, he's joined me on the diet. And we both noticed that we didn't turn red in the sun. Straight away, we were both going, I've always gone brown anyway, but I've always had a little red tinge first of all, and then I've never really burnt, but this was the first time that it just instantly went brown straight away. And some people call it an old man's tan, but as you get older, you tan easily, but I don't know. But so that was that summer was good. Plenty of protein, plenty of fat, eating meat every day, and just down this rabbit hole of watching these videos and learning about food and learning about nutrition. And I don't know, it just seemed the right thing to do. That year, so that was the year we turned 65. And so prior to this, we'd had this part is sort of relative. I can come back to it later. For 65, my wife and I, we both decided to do something different for a trip and a holiday. And so we booked up a hike up Kilimanjaro. Never done anything like it ever in our life. We've always enjoyed a beach holiday. But anyway, that year we did manage to get to the top of Kilimanjaro at 65, and met some fantastic people. And summer we were on a high from that, and then changing the diet and everything else. And what happened then later on in the year was just, I've never been ill in my life, ever. Apart from I had a pain in my top of my rib cage, and apparently I've got a couple of polyps in my gallbladder. But I've never really been ill. I've been always, in good health. And because we turned 65, we had our life insurance ran out, so we had to go through a process of reapplying for life insurance, which meant we'd have to have a medical. And again, I've never had a medical. Neither of us have really. And we find ourselves in a doctor's surgery, being sort of looked over, and this doctor said, what medication are you on? We're not on any medication. And he said, well, you're 65, And I said, so what? Neither of us are on any medication. So after that, we're waiting for this, the results to come through from the, if we're successful in getting new insurance. And that was November 23. And December, a bolt out of the blue. Don't know where it came from. As I said, I've never been ill in my life, never had any real aches and pains other than muscular problems, and that's why I see this guy every couple of weeks. And one evening in December, I think it was the 10th of December, I went to bed, got up in the middle of the night like most blokes do, for a pee. And I just thought, I don't feel too good. I just felt sort of lightheaded, and I could feel the blood sort of draining down through the body. And I said to my wife, I called out to my wife, I said, I don't feel too good, Sue. And I just sat on the end of the bed, and then within that, I just literally collapsed on the floor, which was a bit of a shock to my wife at the time, obviously. She got me around. After about 40 seconds, I sort of came, I woke back up again. And all I can remember was that I was just sucking in air. I couldn't get enough air in. And it most bizarre. I laid on the floor for 35, 40 minutes just recovering, and then finally got back into bed. And we both sort of sat there and thought, what's all this about? What's going on? And I've got my breathing back, and so she decided to, let's phone for an ambulance just in case. We're not sure. Let's phone for an ambulance. I've collapsed on the floor. So the 999, the lady on the other end started talking to me, and because I was talking to her and I'd got my breath back, they were sort of saying, well, don't think we'll send an ambulance now. You seem okay. We'll get the night doctor to give you a call in a couple of hours' time. I said, okay, that's fine. So put the phone down, just sitting there chatting about what was going on. And then my body started to sort of react, and I felt that I needed to go back to the toilet. And so basically what happened then was I cleared myself out, if that's okay to say that. And also, I was starting to be sick. So again, we thought, well, maybe I've got some sort of virus. It's a bit strange. So that sort of that settled down within an hour or two, and finally I went to sleep. And the phone rang at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that was the night doctor. A long 2 hours. That was about 4 or 5 hours, that was. So the night doctor's phoned me up, and I've gone back through what had just happened. And he said, look, I won't come out. He said, you seem to be, feeling okay now, but there'll be a report sent to your doctors. So if you want to give them a call if anything else happens or you don't feel too good, go in and see them. So the Monday, I just literally just laid on the sofa. I didn't want to do anything. I did feel, again, I didn't feel ill. I just felt like tired, and I wasn't holding anything down. I couldn't really drink water or eat any food. So that was Monday. I went to bed very early, and got back up Tuesday, and I decided to phone the doctor just to, just to see. And they suggested coming in. So we made an appointment for Wednesday morning to come in and see them. So they already knew that an ambulance had been called, the report had been sent in, so they knew. So my wife came in with me to the doctor's on Wednesday morning, and I saw the doctor. He checked me over and he said, "Mr. Flegg," he said, "I can't find anything wrong with you." And I went, "I feel fine. I feel fine. I feel 95%, And he said, "I can't find anything wrong with you. You must have had a fainting fit." I think they call it something like a vagal or something. There's a special term for a fainting fit. And but he said, to be on the safe side, we can now do an ECG here. So go out, see the receptionist, book yourself up an ECG and a blood test. So I went and saw the lady, and she said that I could come back in at 2:00 and have an ECG. So I thought, great. It's only 10 minutes down the road. So we drove back home. I said to my wife, "Look, I feel fine. I'm quite happy if you go off and do your daily, what she wants to do. I mean, we both go to the gym." So I said, "If you want to go to the gym, off you go." So she did. And she left me with a stack of Christmas cards to write, which is something I don't really do. So there I am writing these Christmas cards. And I go back in at 2:00. I drive myself to the doctor's and have an ECG. And the nurse said, "Look, I don't know anything about this. The doctor will give you a call if there's a problem." So, right, okay, come back home, get back into the Christmas cards again. And within about 5 or 10 minutes, the phone rings. And this doctor from the surgery, Dr. Javid, his name was, phones me up and said, "Well, Mr. Flegg," he said, "you've had a STEMI." And I said, "What's a STEMI?" And he went, "Well, you've had a heart attack." And I went, "No, really?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "The ECG has shown that you've had a heart attack and you need to go to hospital now and don't drive." And I went, "Oh, okay." So he said, "Which hospital do you want to go to?" and everything else. And I said, "I'll go to our local one, which is Maidstone." And he said, "Yeah, get your, don't drive. Please don't drive. Get your wife to drive you or whatever." So I put the phone down to him, phoned my wife up, and I said, "Oh," my words were, "Have you nearly finished your workout?" She said, "Why?" I said, "Well, apparently I've had a heart attack and I need to go to hospital." And so she dropped everything and just literally came home and took me in. And so that was Wednesday afternoon. So I've had this event on Monday morning, and here we are Wednesday. So I walk in, and they immediately, put a blue band around you because you've had a fall and everything else, and more, another ECG, and more blood was drawn for tests and things. And they come out and say, "Yes, you've had, you're not the usual candidate for a heart attack. You're not overweight, you're not, you're fit and everything else. And but yes, you've had a heart attack. So you're going to be in for a few days while we figure out what to do with you, basically." So I spent a very uncomfortable night on the emergency coronary unit, which you don't get a wink of sleep. They're so busy. And the next day, they finally wheeled me up to a ward, and I had a comfortable day because I was going to go and have an angiogram. They told me Thursday, but it was Friday, so I had a day off and I just rested and slept because I didn't really sleep anything on Wednesday evening. And they put me on the medication straight away, statin And I knew all about statins, and I was like really reluctant. But I thought, no, I'm in hospital. I better do what they say. So on went the statin, blood thinners, blood pressure tablets. Even though I'm looking on the monitor, my blood pressure's never gone above 117/75. Never really went above that at all. So I wasn't suffering from high blood pressure. So Friday, they transferred me to another hospital in Kent, and I had an angiogram. And then that was interesting. Sitting there or laying there and watching your arteries on a big screen, and they have a little conflab between them, and they come out and say to me, right, you've got a blocked right coronary artery. And I went, okay. He said, you've been very lucky. He said, because if it was the left one, you would not have made it. And I'm sort of like, I'm still gobsmacked because I had no pain, no chest pains or anything. There was no warning that night on the Monday evening, early Monday morning, I just literally collapsed. So there was no indication that, I've had a heart attack. So I've got this blocked right artery, and I said, "Oh, what are you going to do?" And he went, "Well, we're not going to stent it. We're not going to clear it because we don't want to weaken the artery wall. So we're just going to treat you with some medication." I went, "Oh, okay." So that was fine. I wiped the tear out my eye because I wasn't going to get, have an operation, which obviously I didn't. Nobody wants an operation, do they really? Unless it's, it's going to save your life, obviously. So they took me back to the hospital, and just started treating me with medication. And Saturday afternoon, I was discharged, but incredibly short time. But I never forget the cardiac nurse that came round to see me before I got discharged. So the cardiologist comes round, does his rounds, talks to you, and says, no more climbing mountains for a year, and you can't do that, or volcanoes, and just give it a year. But you should be okay. The nurse came along, the cardiac nurse, and sat on the end of the bed and said, "Right, Mr. Flegg, let's talk diet." And I went, "Oh, here we go." You know what's coming, Dave, don't you? And it was right. You can only eat. We recommend you only eat 1 egg a day. And I'm going, okay, and then only 6 ounces of red meat a week. I went, really? Only 6 ounces? That's a very small amount. And she said, well, you need to eat, plenty of grains, plenty of, heart healthy oils. And I'm going, I think I better stop you now. And she said, what's that? And I think my wife rolled her eyes as well. And I said, you've just eliminated the most nutrient dense food on the planet. And you're asking me to fill myself up on cheap, polyunsaturated and grains and God knows what else. I said, and sugars. And she was like, well, what? It sort of took her by surprise, really. I said, look, I'm sorry. I said, but I'm not probably going to go down this road. I can't believe that, the hospital food wasn't brilliant. It was mush, really. And you're laying there, and then a trolley walk goes past, and the chap says, "Do you want anything from the shop?" And it's just literally a large trolley about 5 foot high, and it's got all the crisps and chocolate and everything else on it you can imagine. And it's incredible. And then she started talking about going down this route of cutting out red meat and things like that. And I couldn't believe it. I said, I'm sorry, I know you're following guidelines and recommendations that are probably so far out of date, And she went, that's all I can do. She said, I like my job. That was her words. She likes her job. So I said, look, fine. Anyway, so Saturday afternoon, we left the hospital, and bearing in mind that when I came in on the Wednesday, I walked in, no problems at all, nothing, just literally parked in the car park and walked in. When I got up and got dressed to leave the hospital, I couldn't walk 100 yards, 50, 60 yards. I had to stop and take a breather. And it took like two segments to get to the car, because the tablets just knocked me completely sideways, unbelievably.
So it wasn't something going on with your heart. It was the tablets you've been taking.
No, I honestly, Dave, after I had the heart attack, on that Wednesday, when I saw the doctor, I felt 95, 98%. It was like if I hadn't spoken to the doctor and then booked the appointment, I would have probably just gone back to work, within that week. I mean, I'm my own boss, so I could have took it easy, but I would have probably just gone back to work, and we would have been none the wiser. It's just the fact that I had a sort of a touch of the conscience, and I thought, well, I best phone the doctor up and get checked out. And they did the ECG, the first one. So it was a fine line, really. But these coming out of hospital, the tablets just literally suck the life out of you, because what I learned from then was that they don't want you stressing out. The first 3 months after a heart attack are the sort of crucial months that you can have a reoccurrence, so they don't want you to have that. But so they give you a standard package of tablets, which is what my cardiologist told me about later. I'll get to that in a bit. But it was a bit of a shock to sort of all of a sudden from, I've walked in and now I can't walk out, basically, without having a breather. So the next week or two, I got home, and a couple of family members came and saw me, and a couple of friends and everything. And I never really classed myself as being ill. I felt fine coming in. I felt rubbish coming out. But as I say, they don't want you to be, obviously running a marathon or whatever, after you've had a heart attack. So, but as I say, the tablets do knock you for 6, and I thought this isn't good. And then within about a week, my son said to me, "You've got a yellow tinge to your skin." The line going across your forehead up here. And I was like, really? And I looked in the mirror and I could sort of see where he was coming from, but I did have this sort of like, almost like not jaundice, but that kind of paleness to the skin. So I just literally stopped the statin. I'd had a week and a bit on the statin, and so I stopped that. And so that was the first one. So I'm on a blood thinner, aspirin, statin, and a beta blocker. Very small dose, very small doses. But so I stopped the statin, and that Thursday, so this is the week after the heart attack, after I've been in the hospital, the doctor phoned me up, my doctor from down the road, and he went, "Hello, Mr. Flegg." He said, "How are you? You're out of hospital?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "So I was right then?" And I went, "What do you mean you was right?" He said, "You had a heart attack." And I thought, what are you doing? You're trying to score points or something? Are you ticking the box? And I'm going, yeah, I had a heart attack. He said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "Well, I feel fine." apart from, groggy with the tablets. And he went, right. So what I want you to do, he said, I want you to record your heart rate every day, write it down, and every week drop it into the surgery. So we've got a heart, cuff, and because my son is a heart patient, my eldest son had a heart operation at 5 days old, and incredibly, he's 34 now, and we often wondered where his condition came from, because there's no history of heart disease in my side of the family, but my mother died when I was 5 from breast cancer, and in those days I think people reacted differently to circumstances, and my dad remarried within a couple of years because he had 4 boys. I was the youngest of 4 boys, and he didn't want the family split up, so he remarried again, and my mother's family basically got cut off to us. The ties to that side of the family were just literally, disappeared. And I was only very young, 7 years of age 7 years old when he got remarried, so I wouldn't have known. I knew of aunties and uncles, but I haven't seen them for, since I was 7. So we don't know about my mother's side of the family. So we was always a bit suspect or suspicious of where my son's heart condition came from. And he's fine. He's on tablets. He's had a stent put in, but he's doing fine. So so I'm on these tablets. I've cut off the statin, and I'm doing blood pressure readings every day and dropping them down once a week. And my blood pressure was down we now know it was so low because I still couldn't walk. I could only walk 100, 150 yards, 200 yards, and then have to sit down, turn around, come back. They said to me, make sure you go, you walk a little bit further every day, get your strength back. And my blood pressure was sort of some days was in 90 over 65 and all this sort of thing. It was way down. And within a week or two of putting my readings in to the doctor phoned me up and said, stop taking the blood pressure tablet, which was the Ramipril, or now I know it's an ACE inhibitor. I think they call it an ACE inhibitor. Because I've been down so many, I listen to so many people now online. My favourite is obviously yourself, but the stories. But for knowledge, Professor Bickman is just, is in a different league, I think, to everybody around him. So I sort of understand a bit more, a lot more now. So I've cut this blood pressure tablet off. I've stopped taking the statin. I didn't even tell him. I thought, I'm not going down that road. I won't even mention it. So I take 0.75 milligrams of aspirin, soluble aspirin every morning, and I was taking the 1.25 bisoprolol, which is the beta blocker, and I was taking that once a day as well. So with very small doses. So I've stopped the statin. My colours come back in my face because I've stopped the blood pressure tablet. And I'm going through this phase of this sort of 2 or 3 months of questioning my diet, because up to that point, I've been eating lots of meat, lots of eggs, pork, bacon, really enjoying it, feeling really good. Bang, you have a heart attack, and everybody then tells you it must be the diet you're on. It must be the diet. You've got to stop it. And I'm going, no, this isn't. No, this isn't. This doesn't add up. This really doesn't add up. And because of the profession I'm in, I've always questioned professional people. If you put an architect in front of me or an engineer, I'll have an argument with him, on something. If they're trying to tell me something, and my brain is going, no, this is the way you should do things, blah, blah, blah. So I've always had that kind of, I'm suspicious. and but with this in mind, with what's going on with the heart attack and recovering, I'm sort of, maybe there's a doubt, there's a seed of doubt creeping in. So I let a few carbs came back in over that recovery period of 2 or 3 months. I let, the odd bit of potato came back in, a bit of mashed potato, and the odd bit of veg, because I thought I need to build my strength back up, and maybe this is the best way to do it. I know differently now, but at the time I thought, no, let's, but no bread, no pasta, nothing like that. I don't. Anyway, so I start to sort of, every day is getting a little bit better, coming off the blood pressure, the blood thinners, no, not the blood thinners, the blood pressure tablet. That made a huge difference. The energy level came back up, quite quickly. Although I couldn't physically work, I could get out and about, and I could drive after they banned me from driving for, I think, 8 weeks. But I've learned so much from my massage guy, and back in the summer, there was people stopping past the site, because it's in it's in the outlying of a little sleepy village, and so you get these old boys and old girls walking their dogs every day and just stopping and having a nose and a chat to you. And I remember one guy in a mobility scooter used to come up every week, and his wife, and they got a little terrier dog. And I said, I said to him one day, I said, what's up? What's up with you? Why are you in the scooter? He said, I've got MS. I said, have you had MS, long, all your life? And he went, no. He said, over a period of a couple of meetings, he said, no, but I contracted MS a few years ago, he said, and after I had the heart attack. And I went, so you've had a heart attack? And he went, yeah. He said, had a heart attack, and the doctor advised him to cut out red meat, cut out all meat, go vegetarian. And this chap, I would have questioned it, but he duly did what the doctor or the cardiologist told him to do, and within 2 years had contracted MS. And I'm, there's all this going, all these thoughts going on inside my head and whatnot, and I've been listening to videos, and I think Andrew Chafee spoke to a woman doctor in America who was suffering from MS, and within 18 months she got out of a wheelchair because she just was eating meat because everything else gave her other conditions and things. And anyway, I'm going back to one of my sessions with my massage guy. His name is Brett, and he's South African. And I said to him, what do you know about MS? Because he knows all about the different systems within the body. And he said, it's it attacks the myelin sheath of your nerves. You know this. The nerves are coated in a myelin sheath. And he said the sheath starts to obviously wear down, or it's eaten by the body, and it starts to pull apart. And then once it pulls apart, the electrical signals can't get across. It can't jump across. So that's when you lose mobility, and you might lose the use of your arm or whatever. And I went, so what's that myelin sheath made of? And he went, well, it's about roughly 50% cholesterol and 50% fat. I went, well, hang on a minute. So if you've cut out all the fat out of your diet, and you're not eating meat and you're not getting the nutrients and everything else, I said, so if you went vegetarian, would that cause you a problem? And he went, well, it might do. He said, but your body needs cholesterol, it needs fat and proteins and stuff. So I thought, well, it's a bit strange that this chap had a heart attack, and then 2 years of cutting out red meat, he's got MS.
It's
And
a little bit too much of a coincidence.
oh, Jesus, it's a coincidence, isn't it? You know, so when I saw him again, and I said to him, "Oh, I've had a heart attack," and he was like, "No, really? You're fit as a fiddle," because he's been watching me build this house, not single-handed, but with other people. But I said, "Have you ever thought it might be something to do with your diet?" He went, "No, no, 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 no." I said, "Well, you know what about myelin sheath and everything else?" And he went, "Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a lot to it." He's going, "There's a lot to it." I went, "Yeah, I'm sure." I said, "But I've got my brain just likes to join dots or make a picture with jigsaws and put the piece in. I don't get too bogged down with the ins and outs of everything, the technical and the scientific. I just go, that makes sense. If that is, A, B equals C or whatever, it just, to me, it makes sense.
Like,
Why,
all the arrows are pointing in this direction. It's
yeah,
probably in this direction.
yeah, yeah. Why,
Yeah.
why wouldn't you, why wouldn't that not make a difference? If you're cutting out a food and eating something else, then all of a sudden you've got a problem. But he dismissed it, this chap, and I thought, well, fair enough. You can't change people, can you? You can't. The only person you can change is yourself, and that sort of made me realise that I'm in control of me. All I can think about is me. So early 24, I'm sort of having this conflict of about going back onto fully onto sort of just eating, a meat-based diet. And we come out of the 8 weeks period, and they said, I can drive and whatnot. And so we decided to book up a little week away, because all this going on, no one, this is what I find incredible, not the doctors or anybody asked my wife how she was feeling. Not even when we were in hospital. I'm not critical of the NHS, but I just found it a bit strange that no one asked her how she was, because she's the one who picked me up off the floor. She's got all these emotions. I mean, I can't say the word what she said, but when I was on the floor, Sparko, she went, "Don't you die on me, you." Can I say, "See you next Tuesday"? And so her emotions were running high as well, but no one asked her how she was feeling. And she has to pick up the pieces, as it were. And anyway, so we decided to pop off to Tenerife for a week, in that March of last year. And we picked a hotel. I've never been to Tenerife. We picked a hotel, and I didn't know that it had lots of steps, lots of flights of staircases on the outside. It's quite a rocky island, isn't it? And it's sort of on a slope. And I struggled, not struggled, but going up 2 flights of steps to get to the terrace level and things like that, was just literally, I couldn't believe how that sort of, how difficult that was. And anyway, we enjoyed the week, but that week, things started to happen inside a little bit. I was getting a sort of funny feeling, and almost like a palpitation or something. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. And as I say, I'm only, so December, March, 3 months. I'm out of the critical zone. The first 3 months, I got back to eating 90%, 95% carnivore, or protein-based diet. And I've come back to the UK after a week. We've had a nice week, just relaxing between us and having a chat and whatnot. And last year, so from March last year, I probably had about two to three trips back into hospital, just because things happen. You feel faint, and I've had to lie down on the floor a couple of times, and I've had to call the ambulance, and things were rushing. No real danger, but if you start presenting how you presented before, then they're obviously concerned. So one happened when I was at work. I just got to the site and I had to lay down on the floor in the site office and then get taken to the local hospital and spent a day down there in a different hospital, and you're going back through the routines and everything, and within a few hours the body's calmed down. But I've had another ECG, and this doctor came around and said, "Oh, you've got an ectopic heartbeat." And I went, "Oh, have I? Where's that come from then?" And he went, "Well, can't be." And this guy was Asian, but a real nice guy. He was, prior to being a doctor, he was an engineer, and he'd had a heart attack. So he said, "You've got an ectopic heartbeat." And he said that, to be fair, he said that could be the tablets, because what, you get these boxes of tablets and a massive long piece of paper, and you start reading everything down, and beta blocker can give you a heart problem, even though they're giving you the tablet for some reason, but they can actually promote a heart attack. So I'm thinking, oh, maybe it's this bisoprolol. So that was interesting. But the funny thing happened there in that I've been all day in this. I've been there all day in this hospital, absolutely starving. I've had nothing to eat since breakfast time, and my son wanted to. He took me in and he said, "Look, I've got to pop out." I said, "Well, can you come back with something?" He came back with a Big Mac. Or something like that, or a Whopper, from the other one, Burger King. Can I say Burger King? Anyway, so he's come back through the hospital with 2 bags of burger and whatnot, and I just demolished it. I was so hungry. But anyway, came out of that hospital, and so we're talking sort of March time now, late March, and my doctor said to me that they were going to put me in touch with a cardiologist, which sort of, I thought, well, I can't wait. I need to know what's going on and what's going to happen. And so it's amazing. I've got back to work now, not physically working, but I'm driving around, going to the jobs and everything else. And over my career, I've got some fantastic clients. We work in the traditional side of buildings. So I repair listed buildings, old buildings, 500, 600, 400-year-old, things like that. And they're lovely people, but it seems that everybody's got a cardiologist on their phone. They've all got someone. Oh, I recommend you this cardiologist and this one. One of my clients said, "Yeah, I've got this cardiologist up in London," and it was West London. And I went on Google and I looked at him on his website, and I thought, oh, I bet he's £1,000 an hour.
It's like something. A Mayfair cardiologist or something.
Oh, definitely. He was standing there behind his seat with his dicky bow tie on. I'm thinking, no, I don't think I'll be going to see him. That's too far to go. But one of my clients suggested a chap, a cardiologist practice over in Tunbridge Wells. So I phoned him up, and he said he'd see me on a Saturday morning, which was fine. So he's took me under his wing, and I went to saw him, and he said, "Look, Mr. Flegg," he said, "you're on these tablets. You got this ectopic heartbeat. We're going to put you on a 24-hour monitor, a heart monitor, to see what that's going on. So wear that, then bring that back, and we'll have another discussion." So that happened. I've had 2 heart monitors, one from the NHS and one from himself. His one came through obviously quicker because I'm paying for it. And he said the ectopic heartbeat was benign. There's nothing to worry about, but we'll increase your beta blocker. So up went that to from 1.25 to 2.5, and over a period of up to about June, July time, it crept up to 5 milligrams for the day. So 2 tablets at 2.5 milligrams. Because these ectopics were getting stronger, because the heart monitor picked them up. He's still saying they're benign, but they're nothing to worry about. But they were still there, and they kept me up at night for a couple of hours. Some nights, I couldn't lay down. I just sat up in bed. But anyway, he was telling me that I should be on a statin. He said, "Why don't you want to take a statin?" This was his first. Because he explained to me what the NHS gave me, which was basically a standard care package. Everybody gets it. Even though we're told we're all different, everybody's different. Your circumstance, you might have a heart attack, but it's different to the next person and everything else, And so I came out of hospital with 80 milligram artefastatin. And he said, that's the highest dose they can give you. I said, well, I haven't been taking it. And I told him that I'd started to get this yellow tinge. So I just stopped it. And he said, well, statins will prolong your life. And I've been down the statin rabbit hole. And he's like, I said, well, how does that? I said, what I've learned, I said, they all cross the blood-brain barrier. And I don't really want to take a statin. Thank you very much. He said, well, I recommend you go on 5 milligrams of rosuvastatin. And I went, so, okay. I just accepted the prescription, basically. And I never took one. They sat on the side for 3 weeks, and I chucked them away. The second time I went back to see him, and he's going back through, this, that, and the other. He said, oh, things are, you're going along quite nicely, but I still recommend you go on a statin. I said, I'm not taking a statin. I don't want them. I don't feel the need for them. And he said, Mr. Flegg, he said, I take this as a badge of honour. He said, Mr. Flegg, he said, you're my most hesitant patient ever. And I went, I've only seen you twice. And he went, everybody else comes in here, listens to my advice, goes away, takes the pills, and they're happy. You're not. I went, no, I'm not. I don't want the pills. Well, you've got to accept it. He said, you're on the pills. That's it. And I went, no. I said, I don't accept that. I need to take, I've come off the blood pressure tablet. I'm not taking the statin. I said, and I feel absolutely fine apart from an ectopic heartbeat. And a couple of little trips into the, when I've had a bit of a, felt a little bit not under the weather, but, a bit sort of, not feeling quite right.
And sorry to interrupt, but at this stage, you're carnivore. You're kind of back to doing a regular diet.
Yeah, I've never been 100% carnivore. I've always sort of been, because carnivore is is almost like a badge, isn't it? I'm sort of 85, 90, 95%. So I still enjoy a pint of beer now and again, and I still enjoy an ice cream. You've got to live your life. I'm hats off to people and some of the guys online like yourself who can just literally cut everything out and just eat meat. I'm not quite. I'm almost there, to be honest. What I've realised is that my body was quite inflamed. Possibly, before the heart attack and during this last the first year, I was probably, the reaction to the, having what they call an event my body was probably, well, not right inside. So I've always been, a good 80 to 90%. And last year it crept back up because I had 3 months where I was sort of, is this the right thing to do? Because everybody was trying to put a bit of doubt in your mind. You've had a heart attack. It must be the fat clogging your arteries. And I'm going, no. It's. I've learned so much from like Professor Barkay and Professor Bigman and all that, and quantum biologist, what's the lady, Sarah Pugh. I've even talked to Dr. Stephen Hussey, because I thought, well, there's a chap who's had a heart attack and is recovered and got rid of his plaque and everything. And you can actually phone him up and have a chat with him. And so I've done that. And, I now know that it's not the diet, not the food that's caused the problem. Or maybe it was the bad diet for 40 odd years of being told, eat low fat, eat plenty of grains and sugar and all that sort of stuff, and that's what's probably built up the blockage. But I now know that it's blood flow momentum and everything else within the artery, and so I'm almost there. It's taken a couple of years, Dave, to sort of. I can now walk past the cupboard and not think about a biscuit or whatever, For the first year, I would still have the odd biscuit now and again, and I would tell myself that that's okay. I'm going to work that off or whatever. But just recently, something's changed. So there's these things happen, don't they? I mean, it took me to August last year for my mind to get back to where it was, from having a heart attack and all those feelings that you get from. I had a near-death experience. That's what I had. That blacking out on the floor there was nothing there. I can't remember anything. So it has an impact. And I've always been a strong-willed person, and I had to accept that I've had, I couldn't control it, and I've. I'm trying to get over to you. It took to August to sort of get my mind back, and it was like a switch flipped. And all the time I'm seeing, our friend Brett every 2 weeks for a massage, and we chat, we talk, and he's the only person I've really talked to. None of the NHS phone you up and go, "How are you, Mr. Flegg? Are you okay?" No one. I had a nurse, because I had my ear syringe last year, and I had a nurse. She asked me, and she said, "How are you?" And I said to her, "Do you know what? You're the first person in 6 months that has asked me how I was, how I'm feeling. What am I feeling?" And I nearly welled up. No one has asked me. And you're just left to get on with it. And so when they go, "Oh, you shouldn't look at Google, Dr. Google and all this," and I'm thinking, well, where do you go? You can't phone a doctor or can't phone a nurse and go, "Can I have a chat?" You're left to your own devices, aren't you? So you do turn to people online or people that have had a similar experience. Last couple of years has been a real kick in the teeth, but a learning curve, a huge learning curve. And some people say, "Oh, you're banging on about this diet and everything else," and it might get a bit boring to some people, but to me, I'm so now interested in the human body and different systems inside. I mean, and the guests that you've had on in the last few weeks, especially that Pat Thule from America. I need to speak to him about his Connective K, his tablets. and because he's reversed his plaque and everything, hasn't he? He's saved his own life, and that was incredible. So it's I'm sort of got to the realization that, I say, in August the switch flicked, and I accepted the fact I've had a heart attack. I now accept that I probably had an addiction to sugar without knowing about it. And now, just these last few weeks, that's changed. So going full carnivore probably is not too far away. But just going back to December, which was the year anniversary, I had to have a stress test, go back to the cardiologist, and I had the stress test. I did the full 12 minutes on the treadmill, where they raise you up every 3 minutes, and you're wired up to an ECG. And they said they don't normally get people do the full 12 minutes. Most people want to get off after about 6. So I walked into the cardiologist's office, and he had a big beam on his face, and he said, well done, Mr. Flegg. He said, you're coming off the blood thinners in a week's time. I'm going to cut you down on the bisoprolol to 1.25 again, twice a day, the beta blocker. We're going to keep you on that. And I've learned that can help with the arteries. It can soften the artery, make it more flexible. We don't want, as we get older, you get rigid arteries. So he said, and the good news is, I don't want to see you again for 2 years. And I went, that's good. I don't want to see you for 2 years either. But never once asked me about diet. None of them ask you about diet.
They're not interested.
They're not interested.
So he's saying to you, I don't want to see you for 2 years, even though he knows you're not taking a statin.
Even though he knows I'm not taking a statin. So
how important was the statin then?
I don't know. I really don't know. I really don't know. I don't know, Dave. You can't. There's no rhyme or reason, is there? And the NHS, they're not like America. I don't think, and it says it in his small print, that he's not making money out of the medication. He's prescribing me medication, and my doctors are giving, my local practice are giving it to, I'm collecting it from there. I don't know whether, I don't believe he gets a kickback from it. But
it's probably just standard of care protocols or something.
Yeah, probably. I mean, they have to do it, don't they? They have to say it. But when he said he doesn't want to see me for 2 years, he had this sort of wry smile on his face. And I thought, I don't want to see you either. But he's nice.
So at this stage, you're taking the beta blocker, and you're just kind of doing your kind of 90-95% carnivore, and you're feeling okay.
I feel okay. My ectopic heartbeat now is just literally so far in the background. It's just a little murmur, and I can now just take a deep breath, and it stops. The heart then will come back, to its rhythm. I mean, my pulse is about 60 beats a minute, and when I'm asleep, it goes down to 45, something like that. But with these palpitation, or this ectopic beat, will push the heartbeat from 1 to maybe 4 or 5 seconds, and you get this little flutter in between. But I've learned to, again, with Brett, my massage guy, he said something to me one day. It just changed everything, because I was having a right time of it, and I didn't want to get a higher dosage of bisoprolol. And he said to me, he remembered being in a cardiologist's office back in South Africa as a 9-year-old with his granddad, and who'd had heart attacks. And the cardiologist said to the granddad as he's walking out the door, if you ever have another heart attack or you feel it coming on, just make sure you cough and keep coughing. That's all he said to him. Just keep coughing until you get help. And I said to Brett, I went, well, what does that do? And he went, I don't know. He said, but he's got a fantastic app on his phone, and he can show you where the heart is, and it's wrapped by the left lung. The left lung is slightly smaller than the right, and I'm laying on the couch, and he's working on my muscle on my knee, around my knee, and I feel these little palpitation coming on, this ectopic, and I went, "Hang on, Brett," and I just gave 2 big deep coughs, and it stopped. It just literally stopped like that, and I thought, that's fantastic. How is that? And he said it must be the heart. The lung gives the heart a little squeeze as you inflate air. So it gives it like its own little, knocks it back into rhythm. And that's worked every time. Every time since he said, I think that was October. And I actually told the cardiologist this, and he went, it might work for you, but it won't work for everybody. And I went, well, are we all that different? We've all got a heart and 2 lungs. So why would it not work for someone else? At least try it, So that's changed that little snippet there changed made me feel so good at night that I could just literally control this ectopic heartbeat. And like I say, now it's down to literally hardly anything now. I mean, I've cut the caffeine out, and that's changing things. And because I've been a builder, I drink copious amounts of tea. Everybody tells me, and I drink 2 cups of caffeinated beverage in the morning, and then everything now is just decaf. And yeah, we're on the road to where we should, on the road to full recovery, basically.
Oh, wow. It's quite a story, but I'm very glad that, you're feeling good, and, you got to the other side of it. It's pretty scary, right? Because I can understand what you mean when you're talking about, like, it took you that kind of up till August to kind of, feel like, okay, I'm over this. It's like, I can understand that, because when you have something happen like that, you've got 0 control over, and it's life-threatening, it's just like, that really hits you.
Well, as a guy, you just take it in your stride as well. I thought I was this big, tough, I'm not big and I'm not tough, but I just thought this is not an issue. My brain says I've not been ill. I'm not ill. I've just had a heart attack. That's all it is. I know I say that's all it is. It's very flippant, but it didn't. If it wasn't for that doctor giving me an ECG, I would not. If I hadn't gone in, I would have just gone back to work. And I wouldn't have known anything else. So it's quite a surreal. It's quite a sort of when you've not been ill all your life, and then bang, it made me realise that I'm not going to live forever. No one lives forever, obviously, but up until something happens, you feel sort of invincible, don't you? But then you start to question things, and doubt creeps in, and everything else. But I'm almost 100% now getting onto carnivore, and I think that has eating the meat. I'm eating 3 or 4, 5, 4 steaks a week, and egg and bacon every morning, and I have. I keep myself reasonably satisfied with food, real food, and I love it. We all love it.
And you're active with your job as well, so
yeah. Oh, I'm back. I'm probably back to where I was before the heart attack. You to look at me to see me work, you wouldn't believe that I'd had one, and that has got to be down to the diet as much as anything. It all helps, doesn't it? Getting good sleep, sunlight, all that sort of thing. We sleep on a grounding sheet now on the bed, and that I think that's made a difference as well. So all these little things, it's. I think a lot of it though is a state of mind. my story is different to everybody else's, and my experience of a heart attack, it's completely different. I'm having a pint at the pub, and there's a local chap called Mark. He won't even listen to this, but he said, he said, "You've had a heart attack," he said. I went, "Yeah." "Oh, glad you're all right." And he went, I said, "Why is that?" And he said, "Well, I remember my first one." And I went, "First one?" I said, "How many have you had?" And he went, "Oh, I've had 5. And you go, "Blimey, I've only had one. I don't want another one. How have you had 5?" But this chap,
that's
and he was in the hospital, the same hospital, the month before I was there, and 5 heart attacks.
wow.
And he's still, and you go, first one at 30, and he's now 65. And you just think, we're all have been extremely lucky, I suppose.
Yeah. Wow. So, Richard, if people want to reach out to you, do you have any social media or any way of getting in contact?
I'm not on social media, but I do have a personal email that if anybody wants to have a chat about. I mean, because obviously I've left quite a bit out of the recovery story and everything else what's happened. But yeah, Richard Flegg 23 at gmail.com. If anybody wants to phone me up and have a chat, I'm a changed man. I'm quite happy to talk to people now, whereas before the heart attack, I just wouldn't entertain things. But now, yeah, I don't mind having people contacting me, and I don't mind having a chat if they want to. But it's sharing your experiences and little things of what happened, and can if I said something, it might help someone else. So, which is what this is all about, isn't it? Really.
Exactly. I mean, like the coughing thing you talked about, someone might hear that and it could save their life. It's
Well, it can improve their life like it did for me. That was a moment. That was I had to.
Yeah.
That made such a big difference. But yeah.
Yeah. So no worries. I'll put your email in the show notes. Richard, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
That's all right, Dave. Thank you for having me, and keep up the good work that you do. It's I've seen your site grow now. It's really taking off, isn't it? And Carnivore is taking off. I've got one chap who's on it now. A friend of mine, and he's an electrician. And within 4 weeks, his arthritis is gone. So I'm chuffed to bits that I've helped someone already just by sort of telling him what's worked for me. He's given up the vegetables, and it's changed his life, and that's incredible.